Hi guys, it's Dylan from Bijou Diamond Jewellery in London with another watch video, and today we're taking a look at the Rolex Yacht-Master 40 in rose gold with the Oyster Flex bracelet. So as with all my reviews, let's go back in time now and take a look at the history of the Yacht-Master 40. I'm just going to look briefly at history. If you want to learn more in depth about the history of the Yacht-Master, then go check out my Yacht-Master 40 review. But this one still is going to look at some good detail and the history of why Rolex brought this model out. So we're going to go back in time now to 1953, which is when Rolex released the Rolex Submariner. The Submariner was a professional dive watch. It was designed as a tool for professional divers to take down to quite deep depths and use really in rugged, harsh environments like the sea, and it was used really as a professional tool. It was built really ruggedly as a result of this, because in order to withstand that sort of pressure, it had to be built on a much bulkier, more solid level compared to a dress watch or another watch. So it was a fantastically built watch. The watch actually became quite popular with the general public though, not just divers, not just professional divers. It actually became quite popular with people that worked in offices, just the general public. And the reason being is because it was built so solidly to withstand that sort of pressure underwater. It actually lent itself really well to people who wanted to wear a watch every single day. Dress watches are much more delicate than sports watches, and so this Submariner was a fantastic daily wearer that could, as people say, desk diving when you're getting scratches on the watch or hit it on your computer or your desk. It wasn't such an issue because the watch was so solid and rugged. So incredibly popular with the general public after a little while, and Rolex recognized this in the 60s and added a date window, a date function to the Submariner for those that wanted to use the watch in the office or for daily use. Skipping a few years on now to the 90s, the Submariner by this point was pretty much 98%, 99% of the time bought for just personal use in the office or just general things, definitely not for diving. In fact, very few people these days actually buy the Submariner for diving anyway. But around the 90s, majority of the clients for the Submariner were nothing to do with diving, and Rolex recognized this. And Rolex wanted to revamp the Submariner completely redesign it. And the reason being is because they realized that most of the clients that are buying it were wanting something slightly more dressy, something slightly more elegant, but still featured the same rugged reliability that the Submariner featured. So they wanted to redesign the watch in a much more classic, elegant way. And they ended up designing the watch totally different to how it looked. Not completely different, but the watch really lost its kind of rugged feel, utilitarian feel that it had before as a Submariner. So Rolex freaked out before they released the new updated Submariner, and they thought this is a real risky move because we know the Submariner has been incredibly successful for us, a really important model. I think it's a little bit too dangerous to discontinue that model or discontinue that design and revamp it totally. So they continued the current Submariner, and they introduced this revamped Submariner as a brand new model into the collection called the Yacht-Master. And the Yacht-Master was actually a name that they had patented many years before. And the name Yacht-Master lent itself much better to this new design, because the new design only really came in precious metals and polished cases with brushed outer links and polished center links on the bracelet. So overall, it was a much more expensive watch, and it looked much more expensive. It was a little bit more delicate than the Submariner. It just overall was a much more expensive looking piece, much more dressy as well. And so it suited itself and lended itself much better to a yacht environment rather than an underwater environment. So in 1992, Rolex released the Yacht-Master, almost 40 years on from releasing the Submariner. And the Yacht-Master reference that they released was a 16628. Again, like I said, only available in precious metal, full yellow gold when it was released, with a couple dial variations, but the most famous being the white dial with a yellow gold case and bracelet. A couple years later, in 1999, Rolex released the Rolesium variant of this watch, which greatly increased the popularity of the Yacht-Master. The Yacht-Master wasn't a particularly popular watch at the time when it was released in the 90s. It was just so much more expensive than the Submariner, and people just still loved the Submariner and the Submariner design, so it didn't do too well, the Yacht-Master. The 1999 Rolesium version of the Yacht-Master became much more popular. because it was a much more approachable price point. It was a much more affordable price point, being in steel and platinum versus the full yellow gold. So that increased the popularity of the Yacht-Master, but still nowhere near to the level of the Submariner. A few years on, in 2007, Rolex released the Yacht-Master 2, which was a 44mm case size, and that was Rolex recognizing that the public wanted a much larger case size watch. The trends were much larger watches around the mid to late 2000s. So Rolex recognized this, introduced the 44mm Yacht-Master, which featured a brand new complication, which was a regatta complication, basically for a 10-minute countdown before you began a regatta race in your yacht. You needed 10 minutes basically to prep your boat, and this watch allows you to do that. So quite a unique model, quite popular at the time, especially the yellow gold variant. It's not one of their most popular models now, purely because not many people buy watches of that size anymore. But yeah, it's an interesting model, and it's just interesting complication for Rolex as well. Skip a few years on to 2015, which is when we saw the release of this Yacht-Master 40 rose gold with the Oyster Flex bracelet. Really important watch in the Yacht-Master history. It really increased the popularity of the Yacht-Master because at this point it became a unique model in the collection. The addition of the Oyster Flex bracelet made this the only watch in the collection you could buy on a rubber strap, and therefore it became, kind of like you had to buy the Yacht-Master in order to get that look, and it was a fantastic look with the rose gold and the black. So yeah, that really was an important watch for the Yacht-Master. Skipping a few years on now to 2019, which is this year, Basel 2019, we actually saw the release of the Yacht-Master 42, which I reviewed last week. Yacht-Master 42 is a white gold Yacht-Master featuring an Oyster Flex bracelet like we see on this Yacht-Master 40, and also features a brand new 42mm case size. So that concludes the history of the Yacht-Master. Let's go look at some of the features of the Yacht-Master that we're looking at today. On my Yacht-Master 42 review that I did last week, I didn't look too much in detail at the Oyster Flex bracelet on that watch. On this one, I'm going to look much more in detail at the Oyster Flex bracelet, because this was the one that actually was the first ever watch to introduce that bracelet into the Rolex collection. So I think it a bit more appropriate to discuss it on this watch. Let's get into our features on this watch. So we're going to start with our clasp. We've got a real standard Oyster clasp on this watch. Really nice little clasp, in super simple, very, very solid. They don't tend to wear out over time. We've got a nice fold over feature on this clasp. Doesn't protrude out too much from the rubber. I actually prefer this one to the glide lock clasp that we saw in the 42mm Yacht-Master from last week, because this one is much smaller and therefore much less of a scratch magnet. Being in rose gold is very soft. This will scratch very quickly and very easily once you get it, so you have to be aware of that. And because it's on a rubber strap as well, you tend to have that mentality that it doesn't really matter as much if you scratch that sort of area of the watch. It makes you a little bit more complacent, but you have to be careful because that rose gold clasp will scratch very, very, very easily. Moving now up onto our Oyster Flex bracelet. Notice I'm saying bracelet because Rolex actually refers to this as a bracelet, and there's a reason. I would call it a strap, but they call it a bracelet. There's a couple reasons why they call it that. The first reason, or the main real reason, is the fact that it features a titanium and nickel alloy blade inside the strap, so it feels like a bracelet. It actually has a metal core within the strap, and then they've built the rubber around that metal core, so it's done in a slightly different way to solid vulcanized rubber strap that you see from other brands. So that's why they call it a bracelet, and they've tried to put as many features on it as possible to make it feel and have the same level of quality that a bracelet has. So let's have a look at a couple of those features. We're going to look briefly at the finish on the strap. The finish is a beautiful vulcanized rubber satin finish. Kind of this black satin finish looks really amazing, matches the dial and the bezel on this watch as well. So it really ties in nicely with the whole design of the watch. It feels really soft, very, very nice quality. One of my favorite things is the fact that Rolex has kept that line down the two lines or separation lines down the center of the strap, and that reminds you of where they would have the polished center links on that bracelet. So it looks in a way like a bracelet still, because you have those separation lines, that remind you of the links. And it's also tapered just like a bracelet as well. So you still get those bracelet vibes, and still it will wear very similar to a bracelet, but obviously with the sportiness and sporty feel and practicality of a rubber strap. Let's turn over the strap now and look inside. Inside of the strap we have these wings, which you'll see. They're these spongy wings that are actually incredibly comfortable. They're made really for two real reasons. It's kind of three, but two main reasons. One of the reasons is to reduce the contact area between your wrist and the watch or the strap. And the reason for that is that increases comfort a little bit. They actually create a little bit of cushioning as well around that area where the strap would usually pinch to your wrist and pull quite tight around the edges of the rubber. So this helps to cushion that a little bit and make it a bit more comfortable. Second reason is that these actually help to raise the rubber strap above your wrist and create some separation between your wrist and the rubber strap, and that makes it a bit more increases the ventilation, helps to air out in between the strap and the watch and your wrist, and that helps to stop you sweating too much underneath the strap, because rubber straps are they have no ventilation whatsoever. They are not breathable at all, and if you've ever worn a rubber strap versus a bracelet, you'll notice that the rubber strap will make you sweat much more so than something like a bracelet would. So Rolex has tried to address that issue there by creating those little ventilation wings. Some reasons they also say is that it helps the watch to not spin around on your wrist. They help to kind of anchor the watch perfectly center on your wrist. I'm not sure how true that is because it can still move around. But those two main points of the ventilation and the comfort are the main reasons Rolex put those wings there. What do I think of the wings? I think they're a really cool addition. They're a really smart design. They are a little bit more comfortable maybe than just a straight rubber strap. However, I still think that a rubber B strap is incredibly comfortable, or other straps from other companies are very, very comfortable anyway. So I don't think they're an essential, but they are pretty good. And an interesting design as well from Rolex. One thing I'd say that I kind of miss on this strap versus something like a rubber B strap is the fact that we've got this gap between the lugs or the case of the watch and the strap. On rubber B straps, they tend to close up that area and fill in that whole lug area with rubber, just as a bracelet does. And I think that makes the watch look much better. I think the strap looks much better as well on that sort of watch. And that kind of has been addressed by Rolex on the Daytona series, the Oysterflex Daytonas, because they actually have end links on those watches, whereas this one doesn't have end links. They just kind of got a straight rubber strap on the end. It looks okay. It kind of gives it a bit more of a sporty vibe, I think. But rubber B actually does a really interesting strap for this watch, kind of with this alligator design. Also in rubber, so you can wear it, swimming, blah, 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 keep to that Yacht-Master name. But I think that kind of suits this style, this rose gold watch, maybe better than this rubber does, because it helps to make that watch actually look a bit more elegant. It is actually a really beautiful watch, this watch. And I think the rubber strap kind of limits it in a way with what you can wear it with. But in some ways, the rubber strap makes it what it is. So yeah, overall, fantastic rubber strap. I really, really like the addition of the Oysterflex. It's quite underrated. I'd say comfort-wise, it is very, very comfortable. But I'd say maybe a rubber B strap is slightly more comfortable. Moving now up onto our case, we've got a beautiful rose gold, all polished, mirror polish finish case on this watch. It's an absolutely stunning case. I much prefer this case to the 42mm Yacht-Master that we looked at last week in white gold. Even though I'm not a rose gold fan, this does look absolutely fantastic. Probably the main reason that I prefer this one though is the fact it's a slightly smaller size at 40mm versus 42. But yeah, beautiful design, really elegant, and you can see how they've made it much more classic and elegant and kind of a bit more flowing than the Submariner. The Submariner is much more boxy, sharp-edged versus this watch. This watch definitely wears smaller also than a Submariner. Moving now up onto our bezel, we've got an amazing sandblasted Cerochrome, so ceramic bezel on this watch. We've got a mixture of sandblasting and polish finish for the ceramic. So they actually sandblast the whole bezel and then they polish the numbers, which are raised up. So the numbers and indexes around the bezel are raised up and polished, and that helps to kind of create this amazing contrast between the finishes on the bezel, and that's how you can read the bezel. So it's a really cool, unique design. Combination of polished and satin finish on this watch is really amazing, and Rolex has continued that motif throughout the whole entire piece, right from where you see the clasp underneath, contrast between the polished center part to the clasp and the brushed part, outer parts of the clasp. You've got that satin finish strap, that beautiful satin finish strap that ties in with the satin bezel. We've got our polished accents all over the case, obviously with our twinkly bits of the bezel and our polished case in general. And we've got those amazing polished accents on the bezel with our ceramic, and those really, really cool dial as well with our polished hands and polished indexes, and then that satin beautiful dial. So fantastically designed watch. I really, really think this is an underrated piece from Rolex. It's just very subtle in its design, and I'd say the reason why this watch is actually something I really do like when I don't usually like rose gold is because of the way it's designed. It is designed in a much more subtle fashion than a usual standard rose gold watch. Okay, so moving on to the dial, briefly, it's a very, very simple dial, just the same basically as a Submariner. We've got our date window also on this watch, kind of maxi style markers and hands, real nice, super legible watch. We've got rose gold hands, rose gold markers, and lots of lume as well. So that concludes our features on this watch. On to whether or not I would own this piece. 1000% I would own this piece. That's quite unusual, like I said, for me to say about a rose gold watch. I usually don't like rose gold watches, but because Rolex has done this one so subtly, it doesn't immediately appear rose gold when you see it from a distance. I think obviously because it's got that bezel and that darker dial and the rubber strap, you know, the actual rose gold that you see is only from the cases and the lugs. So it's much more subtle compared to like a full rose gold Daytona or a rose gold Yacht-Master, you know, the bimetal Yacht-Masters. So it is completely different in that respect. It maintains that same subtle under the radar feel that we get from the 42mm white gold Yacht-Master. The case, you know, in terms of its dimensions and size, is actually really beautiful as well. That's one of my main things I love about this watch, is how it fits on your wrist. It just fits beautifully. It fits much better for me than a Submariner because it has kind of a little bit more of a low profile feel, and those lugs are a little bit more tucked in, they're a bit more elegant, they're kind of a bit more curvy. The whole watch is much more curvy. Yeah, overall a fantastic timepiece. I absolutely love this Yacht-Master. I'd say possibly the ultimate variation of this Yacht-Master would be maybe in white gold at this 40mm case size. I think that would be a really, really special piece. Hopefully one day Rolex will give us a Oyster Flex Submariner in steel. That will be an awesome watch that will sell for, you know, I'm sure it'll be super, super, super popular. But yeah, overall a fantastic piece, a brilliant everyday wear, in fact, and something that is super versatile. If you get it on a leather strap, this actually could be your only watch, and it would be a fantastic only watch. Thanks guys for watching. Let us know in the comments what you think of this Yacht-Master 40 in rose gold with the Oyster Flex bracelet. Would you own this watch? Would you maybe own the 42mm over this watch? What is your dream combination? Maybe you'd like a platinum version of this watch with a blue dial. Let us know in the comments. And as always, if you're interested in this watch or any other watch in the Rolex collection or any other collection of any Swiss watch manufacturer in the world, then don't hesitate to contact us. Our details are in the description, and also at the end of the video, it'd be a pleasure to call that watch into stock for you.